So, I've finished watching the new Fallout series on Amazon. The general reception of the show seems to fall into two groups: newcomers who have never played the games who think the show turned out great, and my camp, people who played the games and are a little bit upset because of the changes made to the canon. The first thing I need to say about a show like this is that, for the most part, the show is a reminder that Bethesda is actually capable of producing good stories in the Fallout universe. People complain about Fallout 3, 4, and especially 76, but for all the grumbling about how these games have bad writing, people still play Fallout 4 today. Nobody was really complaining about Fallout 3 until New Vegas came out and showed us that a game with the same engine and basic gameplay could have much better writing. And to this day, fans agree that Point Lookout and Far Harbor were genuinely good additions to the Fallout lore, along with literally anything involving the Dunwich Company or the Church of Adam. And the one thing everyone seems to like about 76 is the cryptids and their lore. For the most part, the TV series follows a similar vein. It's very flawed, and some of those flaws are pretty outstanding, but there are good parts, and whether they outweigh the bad is up to the individual viewer. But Fallout 4 also shows that the series doesn't understand why people loved Fallouts 1, 2, and New Vegas. In particular, the conflict between the factions in Fallout 4 seemed more like they were trying to recapture the conflict over the Hoover Dam, but had no idea why people liked all four factions enough to play the game over and over again to see each different ending. Even the Legion makes enough valid arguments that I had to do a playthrough with their faction at least once. But what we got in Fallout 4 instead was a four-way fight between the Minutemen, the faction that's good but impotent, the Railroad, a faction that's good but stupid, the Brotherhood of Steel, who are evil and stupid, and the Institute, who are somehow evil, stupid, and incompetent. To put things into perspective, remember how in New Vegas, the very first thing we're told about the Legion in Good Springs is that they're an army who enslaves the people they conquer? And in that same early quest line, we find out about the Powder Gangers, who are raider gangs that were crushed by the NCR and placed in the NCR Correctional Facility, but broke free when the NCR decided to use them for labor, building bunkers to fortify the Mojave. The justification that the NCR used for this was that it was expensive to house them, and they should be giving back to their nation. But the only reason that these gangsters were part of this nation is because the NCR subdued them by force. And yeah, the Powder Gangers are shown to be bad people, and the NCR is morally in the right to incarcerate them. But that's not what gives them the power or the authority to lay down the law or force them to work. The reason the NCR can put the Powder Gangers in the NCR Correctional Facility is purely because they outmanned and outgunned these raider gangs through violence. And isn't that the same way that the Legion establishes its dominance over the tribes they've conquered or enslaved? You might not have noticed all of this when you played the game the first time, but your brain did. I'm pretty sure people are not going to stop playing Fallout New Vegas until the sun explodes. And if we ever become an interstellar species, maybe not even then. But the biggest problems I have with the Fallout Amazon series are changes to some of the characters people loved from the older games, especially New Vegas. I'm trying to give Amazon the benefit of the doubt, but sometimes there's no doubt to be had. Alright, this is as far as I can go without spoilers for the TV series. Last warning. Okay, so in the last episode, we see several characters in a meeting that almost ruined the entire show for me. Vault-Tec and several other major companies have sent representatives to meet and discuss plans to not only prepare for nuclear Armageddon, but Vault-Tec proposes the idea to drop the bomb themselves in the belief that they'll be able to make more money by wiping out their competition. Yeah, that totally makes sense. You'll make so much money selling vaults once there's no one left to buy them. Barring the people who already bought one, that is. Now, Vault-Tec being evil has always been part of the established Fallout canon, and questions of who originally dropped the bomb have been unanswered as far back as when Black Isle launched the first game. Even at the end of the series, it's not actually clear if Vault-Tec fired the first nuke, or if they just planned to, only for someone else to beat them to it. The Chinese might very well have fired the first ICBM. Or it could have been the Enclave, or the Zetans, or the entity worshipped by the folks over at the Dunwich Boars might have had something to do with it, seeing as it seems to have some connection to radiation. There's even a theory that some of the AI of Fallout realized that a nuclear war was inevitable and decided to trigger it before someone else managed to start the apocalypse on their own terms. But what bothers people about this meeting scene is the fact that two really well-loved characters from the franchise appear to have their personalities, motives, and entire identities rewritten just so they can make a cameo in this one scene. Frederick Sinclair has had his entire personality and even his appearance wiped away. Heck, originally Sinclair didn't even work for Big Mountain. All he did was contract them and allow some of their experimental projects to be used for the Sierra Madre. That doesn't give him executive decision-making authority for their organization. And if he was in on the plan from Vault-Tec, why did he need to build a secret bunker under the Sierra Madre in the first place? Why wasn't he given a spot in a vault? I am starting to wonder if this is supposed to be Frederick Sinclair Sr., and his wife cheated on him. Why didn't they just make Dr. Klein be the representative from Big Mountain? It'd be in character for him to go forward with Vault-Tec's plans. And I really hope that Mr. House wasn't actually on board with this. In the show, they make it kind of ambiguous, because he never actually voices any approval for their plans, which is a sign in the right direction. And obviously, if he did voice any kind of dissent, they would all try to kill him because he knows too much about their plan. But I'm really worried that a show which tries to make capitalism more evil than it was in the video games is going to do him dirty in the next season. What made Mr. House such a good character was the fact that he was never truly a good person nor a truly bad person. I'd say he leaned more on the side of good intentions, but he was out of touch with the common man. Not because he was rich, or because he had lived for over 200 years, or because he was a cybernetic machine god, but even before the war, when he was fully human, because he was just so smart. A genuinely brilliant man who didn't wear a pocket protector to a pool party, but understood business as much as he did machines, turning Robco into an industrial powerhouse. And it needs to be said that out of all of the massive corporations from pre-war America in the Fallout lore, Robco is quite possibly the only company that wasn't doing unethical stuff behind the scenes. Which is ironic because when the company first showed up in Fallout 1, Black Isle didn't actually know what they did or made before the war. Robco originally meant rob consumers and had nothing to do with robots. But there's not actually any evidence of them doing that. It was just a joke. And that means Mr. House is quite possibly the only CEO in pre-war America who wasn't a fraud, a cultist, a human rights abuser, or a war criminal. That's quite the accomplishment when the rest of the lore suggests that being a crooked son of a gun was the only way to get ahead in pre-war USA. And it would take a respectable amount of dedication to stick to that path when no one else is doing it. In every playthrough, no matter which faction I'm working for, unless it's Mr. House himself, it always bothered me to have to kill him. Because underneath all the robots and computer screens and the life support chamber, he was just an autistic genius who understood the situation better between the factions of New Vegas for what it was. It was like if Sheldon Cooper, armed with robots and equipment, was trying to rebuild society. His ending isn't good for New Vegas, but that never makes it easier for me to kill him. And the fact that you get good karma points for it tells me that even Obsidian didn't understand what kind of character they had made. So you can understand why I'm worried that the final scene in the last episode of the Fallout Season 1 is a sign that Bethesda is going to try and derail this character. If Bethesda does go in the direction of making Mr. House just another evil CEO of the pre-war era, then they risk running directly against the grain of Fallout canon. Canon is like a piece of lumber that you are trying to shape into whatever carpentry project you are trying to build. You are in the clear when you're going with the grain. You can sometimes cut diagonally to the grain when necessary with minimal resistance. But as soon as you cut against the grain, as soon as you go against the established canon, you get pushback. And before long, you don't have whatever carpentry project you are trying to build, you just have a mess. Of course, Bethesda already played games of the established canon in Fallout regarding the ghouls. The anti-feral serum that the ghouls take in this show is a bigger issue than people seem to realize regarding the rest of the Fallout lore. First, there is no way that a serum like this could reasonably be developed in the Fallout universe. Based on the established canon and the rest of the franchise, the first ghoul was Skinny Malone, found in Fallout 4. He hides in a hidden shelter after receiving some experimental radiation treatment before the war. He's been in this bunker ever since, with no sign of him going feral or receiving special drugs to keep him sane. There are lots of cases like this in the Fallout universe, where ghouls have been isolated for years or even centuries, and in some cases aren't even aware that they've become ghouls, and neither turn feral nor are receiving any kind of treatment to keep them from going feral. Now, the plot of the Fallout TV series has more holes in it than a moth-eaten slice of Swiss cheese, but most of them can be overlooked if you just don't think about them for very long because they aren't very important, or they simulate something similar in the games. Why do characters all seem to travel at different rates? Well, because Lucy has a Pip-Boy, and so she can fast travel, just like in the video games. Why do people shrug off injuries that should either be fatal or cripple them for life? Because they can do that with stim packs in the video games. Why does the Enclave scientist have the cold fusion component? Video game! But none of these become vital enough to the plot to snap me out of the story. The ghoul drugs are another matter. They wreck everything previously established about ghouls, and forced me to think every time it became a plot point about all the holes it punctured in the lore for the entire universe of Fallout. And that is when my suspension of disbelief snapped like Thaddeus's toes. The big issue of canon that most people are talking about right now is the addition of female custodies to the Warhammer 40k universe. And while I'm not happy with that perversion of lore, most people seem to have already jumped onto that topic and understand why that's such a bad idea. Because the people behind the female custodies have made it very clear that they openly hate their own fans. But the Fallout issue seems a lot sneakier. Like I said, the ghoul serum breaks my suspension of disbelief not just for the show, but for the entire franchise as a whole. Not the injuries or the plot holes. There was, however, one more thing in this series that took me out of the show, and it was the part where Leon von Felden, the representative of West-Tec, wants to test the forced evolutionary virus on illegal immigrants. You don't have illegal immigration in the Fallout universe. At least, not that's been mentioned in any significant detail. This is a world that's based off of the culture of the 1950s. We didn't have illegal immigration back then. At least not government-sanctioned illegal immigration like we do now. If we had real-world illegal immigration in the world of Fallout, and it continued until 2077, there wouldn't be an America by that point to be in a Cold War. The communist propaganda didn't bother me, because that was always present in Fallout. But this is one of those areas where inserting real-world politics into a show cracks the immersion in half. More so than any plot hole ever could, because I can actually feel the creators of the show wagging their finger at me, breaking the fourth wall. Bethesda has declared that this TV series is canon, even the parts that take a sledgehammer to the previously established canon. And I don't think Bethesda understands why they can't do that. It's not just a matter of whether they have the right, it's a question of whether they have the ability. There is an anime called Recreators, definitely in my personal top 10, which I can almost never recommend to anyone who isn't interested in becoming a creator themselves. Which is weird because the show features a kid in a giant mecha fighting a knight from a dark fantasy, along with a magical girl, a private eye from a cyberpunk world, and a whole list of ridiculously cool stuff. The show, on the surface level, looks like it would run entirely on the rule of cool. But instead, it uses those scenes rather sparingly, and spends a lot of time with characters discussing the nature of writing, and the limitations of being a creator. And if you're watching this on Rumble, you get to see clips from the show that YouTube won't allow to demonstrate what I'm talking about. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you get to keep watching the adventures of Stabby McGee, who turned off hardcore mode when he got tired of Eddie getting killed. This series is a gold mine of important lessons for how to improve your writing, and there will probably never be another anime like it, because I can guarantee it didn't make anywhere near as much money as it did in impact on the creative community as a whole. And I get it. Anyone who isn't aspiring to be a creator isn't going to like this show as much as I did, for the same reason I don't really enjoy watching shows about fishing. The premise of this show is that a number of characters from popular works are breaking into the real world, even getting to meet their creators. At first, they view these creators as gods, since they effectively created the universes that these characters came from. But as the story unfolds, it becomes very clear that the creators don't have unlimited control over the worlds that they've made, and a recurring theme of what they can or cannot do is based on what the audience will accept. The entire show then examines this effect on both the heroes and the villains, and there is a difference between them and the characters that are trying to save the world, and the ones working with the main antagonist, who is trying to destroy the entire universe in a cosmic temper tantrum. Everyone I've heard talk about this show claims that they enjoyed watching the cookie-cutter magical girl getting smacked in the face with the reality and collateral damage her powers cause in the real world, but then grumble that the show had nothing going on after her arc concluded. And they especially complain about the parts where they talk about what makes a story work and what holds it together. But for me, and any other aspiring creator, these are the real meat and potatoes of the show. This is where the anime demonstrates its real love for the craft. The giant robot fights and cool magical duels only matter if the characters you've made are worth investing in, such as a knight/princess from a grimdark fantasy who wants to know why her creator deliberately made a universe where everyone is suffering. And his answer better not be, because it makes a good manga. Seriously, imagine if you lived in a world like Warhammer, and you got transported to the world of the people who made it that way, and you found out the only reason your universe is so horrible is because it was entertaining. Or because it allowed your creator to pay their rent. That doesn't turn out to be the case for Alicetaria, but it does end up being the reason why Blitztalker from the cyberpunk world had to kill his own daughter after she was turned into a weapon of mass destruction. Because it was dramatic and it put food in his creator's fridge. That's all there ever was to it. I honestly liked these characters' arcs as much as I liked Mamika's. And Mamika's arc reminds us all that just because a villain is cool and gets lots of praise from fans in-universe and out, that doesn't change the fact that they're still evil, selfish, and probably do things when the cameras are not rolling that you'd find appalling. Heh, no spoilers. But in addition to making good characters, if you really want to have your epic fights and actually have them mean anything, your audience needs to be able to accept it. That means the characters, their powers, where they are at the moment that the fight breaks out, everything really. To give an example, the main villain can gain new powers almost spontaneously because the spectators observing these fights, who think that this is all just a show made to celebrate anime and manga culture, keep making fan art of her and adding new abilities, which the general audience who watch videos of these fights online think are now canon, and they get added to Military Uniform Princess's actual powers, even though she doesn't even have a creator to write these elements into her canon lore. And these powers are more stable than the deliberate power-ups that the creators try to give to their characters who are fighting to stop the Military Uniform Princess. No, that's not her actual name. Her real name is a spoiler. The show leans into the idea that the villain can be overpowered while heroes have to earn their abilities. Even when the creators have a good cause for giving their characters more abilities, the audience ultimately gets to decide what's canon. And that's probably the most important lesson to take from this show. It's the people you are making your work for who get to decide what they will accept. And that's a lesson that Hollywood, Games Workshop, and Bethesda still haven't learned. Let's hope they do someday. Alright, that's all I have for today. I'm hoping by the time I come out with my next video, I'll have some cover art for the next book to show off. Speaking of the next video, Fallout's excessive gore combined with my editor getting upset with me for some of the content in my next book has raised the question of necessary versus unnecessary dark content, and the difference between grim material that improves a work of fiction and gratuitous things that just seem to be there so that the work will get an R rating. I'll also be examining some of the real-world consequences of trying to scrub away the grim and gritty things that happen in real life. I don't feel like making a war never changes joke right now, so thank you all, and goodbye.